Okay, so I'm going to call to order the Regional Housing Council meeting for Thursday, February 18th. Welcome, everyone. Let's go ahead and do a quick round of check-in introductions for the record. Let's start with the City of Lacey. Carolyn, can you walk us through you and your staff?
Yes, thank you. Carolyn Cox from Lacey City Council, and we have here our City Manager, Scott Spence, and we have Rick Walk, our Community and Economic Development Director. And am I missing? Oh, we have Kelly Adams, Project Manager.
Welcome. Let's go to Tumwater. Michael, can you walk us through your crew?
Yeah, hi, Michael Althauser, Tumwater City Council. I think we also have, looks like John Doan is on the line, our City Administrator, and Brad, our Senior Planner, and then also Joan Cathy, our Deputy Mayor. But I'll also let Joan introduce herself too. Or Mayor Pro Tem. I apologize, Joan.
Whatever.
Hi, Joan.
Hi, Jim.
Okay, so let's, I'll do Olympia next. I'm Jim Cooper, and we have Kerry Retland with his office assistant, and Keith Staley, our assistant city manager. So thanks for being here. Let's go to Yelm, Mayor Foster.
Hi, this could take a while. Hold on. Hi, I'm JW, Mayor of Yelm, and let's see who I've got with me today. Okay, so there you go.
Welcome. And that you killed just the right amount of time because now we have the compliment from Thurston County. So I'll go ahead and ask Carolina, can you introduce yourself, and then either you or Romero walk us through the Thurston County staff that are on.
Sure, and I'll leave that to Ramiro, but hello, my name is Carolina Mejia, and I'm the Thurston County Commissioner. And Ramiro Chavez is here, who is our County Manager, and I'll let him do the introductions for the rest of our staff.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon. We have with us this evening Shelley Slatter, the Director of Public Health and Social Services. With our housing unit, we have Tom Webster and Jacinda Stilges. And we have also the one and only Kelly Murno with our homeless side of the business. I think I covered all. Thank you.
Did we get everyone? Has anybody been missed? Okay. Kelly, did we have anyone sign up for public comment?
We do not.
Okay. Okay, so then just a quick check-in on the agenda. Is everybody okay with the agenda as it stands? Okay, great. We have an agenda. We have no public comment, and so I'll move to the approval of the January minutes. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any amendments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So that takes us to another vote for chair and vice chair. But first, let's take a minute and celebrate because we have a final ILA. So it's very exciting. Everyone has signed. And then in a minute, we're going to start, open it back up and amend it again. So, so this would be the elections for the year. And when I talked to Tom and Keeley and Commissioner Mejia, we talked about this is actually good. So the term will start in February, and that way we get through all of the council and commissioner retreats and assignments in January, and we can do the elections after we know who the board will be or the council will be each year. So does that sound good? Is there any questions or comments about where we are on that? Okay, so then I'm going to go ahead and open up nominations for the chair of the Regional Housing Council. Are there any nominations?
I nominate Jim Cooper for the chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll accept that nomination. Are there any further nominations? Are there any further nominations? Okay. All in favor of myself, Jim Cooper, being the chair of the Regional Housing Council, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. I'm proud to keep doing it. But if any of you ever want to, just let me know and I'll gladly hand it over. So, and so that takes us to vice chair. And so as a reminder, I should have done this first, but as a reminder, our interlocal agreement says that the chair or the vice chair will be a representative from the fiscal agent or the sponsoring organization, and that being Thurston County. We have one option for vice chair with this structure, and that would be Commissioner Mejia. So if everyone's okay, then I will ask for a vote to approve Commissioner Mejia as the vice chair. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations, Carolina.
Thank you very much. The competition was tough.
Right. Okay, so then that takes us to the First Amendment of the RHC Interlocal Agreement. And so I'm gonna turn it over to Tom to talk through with us the addition of some language around 1406.
Thank you, Chair Cooper, and good evening, everyone. So now that you have the RHC ILA approved, would like to amend it to address the allocation of the 1406 resources. We talked about in the fall the $1406 that the jurisdictions control. We had initially talked about having a separate interlocal agreement that dealt with the 1406 those dollars, and we had a draft of that ILA. After consultation with the legal counsels from all the jurisdictions, there was a strong legal opinion that we just incorporate this into the existing RHC ILA and not have two separate documents that we need to be keeping track of. So we've incorporated the substance of that 1406 ILA into the Regional Housing Council ILA. As part of your meeting packet, you will see the amendment with the additional language in track changes. Most of the additional language comes on page 10 of your packet under section 6 of funding. And so this language has been reviewed by legal counsels and we received their input. I did want to call out, since your legal counsels have reviewed this, and we did make a few edits to section 6F, just clarifying kind of the RHC's role in making decisions around 1406 funds. And so I don't know if folks have had a chance to review the language in the draft amendment. And if there's any questions, we're happy to address those at that time. If this language is acceptable, then I think we're ready to move forward with passing it on to your councils for official approval and to sign the amendment. I know there is one change that we still need to make that didn't get captured in track changes, and it's my apologies, is we still have the former Commissioner Hutchings listed as the signatory for Thurston County, and we'll change that. And I don't know, I look to Ramiro to see whether that should be the chair of the board, Commissioner Menser, or if Commissioner Mejia should be the signatory to the ILA. But we will make that change before finalizing this.
Scott?
Okay, I'm going to be a little bit of an outlier here. So I think it captures the spirit because, again, we want the RHC to be able to provide the guidance and where we're going to spend and invest dollars. But when it comes to the 1406, can we add a clause that says something to the effect that if a jurisdiction does decide to remove their dollars from this group, that preserves that independence? Because right now this defers then to the Board of County Commissioners. And so I think when we originally decided to do our independent ordinances, it was on the basis of we wanted to make sure that we had the ability to guide those dollars based on a jurisdictional perspective. So I think it's fine, but as long as there's maybe potentially an out clause, otherwise I think that would negate our individual ordinances that we pass to preserve the 1406 per jurisdiction.
So are you saying like reserve the right to be able to go a different way than the group? Yeah,
I'm not saying we are, but again, this is setting us up to say, if we agree this new interlocal agreement, then that would, again, be somewhat in conflict with our individual ordinances.
Okay. I guess what is the out language that's already in the ILA inclusive enough without knowing where that is exactly off the tip of my tongue?
Well, I guess I don't want to, I guess I'm just looking at just the portion of the agreement. We don't basically take away the entire RHC. I'm just talking about just this one funding source.
Okay.
Scott, there's a proviso, it's letter H, that says the jurisdictions may not utilize their own 1406 tax revenue prior to adding the funds to the pooled account. So that tells me there's some individual autonomy, but the commitment to pooling for regional impact as well. Does that get at your concern?
Yeah, I guess I guess I'm more going back to the deference to the County Board of Commissioners' final say in where the dollars go. Okay. Again, I'm assuming we all agree that we're going this direction, but
that makes sense to me. So instead of saying you want to be able to pull out, you want RHC to be the final say.
Well, I think that was the original language, but I think this is the whole point of this language review.
Yeah, Tom, can you talk to that at all? Like, it does seem odd that 1406 would go back to the county commissioners if we're all agreeing to pool it with this being the authority.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask Ramiro to weigh on this because I know he's been involved in this.
Okay, sorry, Ramiro, I didn't see the hand raised, so go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And I understand that, but that's in the spirit of what all the funding is coming to the RHC. And since the county is the fiduciary agency that will make the decisions on the 1406, I believe the language that we crafted in the original agreement addresses that. That is not going to be a unilateral decision by the board of county commissioners to change the direction or the suggestions by the RHC. There's going to be an opportunity to go back and forth. But it really goes back down to the decisions of the funding related, because everything is going to come to the county, and the Board of County Commissioners cannot delegate the funding decisions. That's really is more of a technical conversation that we need to have, and that is the commitment, because the county is the one who's probably putting the most of the $1406 into the regional pool. If we go by dollars and cents, the county is the one who's putting the most contribution on this, because by the result of the taxation that we get out of the $1406, the county is the one who gets the most. So that's really more of a technical conversation that we need to have, and it's not necessarily about the trust or distrust, whether the commissioners will change the decision of the RHC. That language and that conversation already occurred months ago.
Yeah, well, and what you just said makes sense too, that we wouldn't, if we pool the money and it goes to the county, the commissioners still have to allocate the expenditure in the end, no matter what the ILA says.
And that's really what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that doesn't get, what I hear Scott asking though is, should any one of the 5 members be able to walk away with their 1406 money, and what does that look like? And would that, I mean, to me, my question is, does that mean you're still a member of the RHC if you don't pool the money that's in the ILA? Like, I'm just trying to think that through. So other thoughts?
Can I offer just one last thought on that one, Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
And that really goes, I believe, against the principles in which the RHC was formed, because the RHC was predicated and the $1406 be on the regional pool to have regional decisions. So if we add a clause, then now every jurisdiction has the opportunity to pull out of those funds based on the individual needs. I think it defeats the purpose of having this conversation at the regional level.
Other thoughts? Go ahead, Scott.
Maybe just one thought on that. I don't disagree. And I don't think anyone wants to pull that apart. I think, but when we originally went and initiated the $1406, we could have had that whole debate back then and just had the county make one ordinance and basically be the umbrella for the entire county, which include the cities. But we made I guess, a conscious decision to do individual actions just to preserve that authority by jurisdiction. I think we can all work together. I guess that was the original intent by each jurisdiction passing their own 1406 legislation.
Okay. Others?
Well, historically, there was, I think there was some difference of opinion within the members of some communities were wanting to use their money right now rather than let it sit until the RHC could have a direction. Others were more interested in amassing funds so that they could do a bigger lift. And I think that was meant to try to accommodate both needs in the early stages.
Joan?
Jim, I just have a clarifying question. So what is it that the county has the final say of? What we all decide to do with 1406? Or is it, I think what Scott's trying to do is say, which I remember this discussion back a ways, is to say that the county does not have the final say over what a city decides to do with their 1406. The understanding is that we're all going to pool it. But if at some point, one of the cities decides that on a particular year they need to hold it for some reason, they wouldn't have to get the county's approval for that. Is that sort of right, Scott?
Yeah, maybe we just need more discussion and a technical standpoint. Again, I'm just trying to have a little bit of parity with the county when it comes to the final decision, when it comes to how we allocate $1,406.
Yeah.
Okay, so that
I understand.
I'm sorry if I'm behind, but yeah, now that's clear to me. Like, the county pools the money, they have the expenditure, but then they also have the fiduciary responsibility around their own dollars, just like we do. So should each city council be approving that on the way out? Is that what you're asking, versus the ability to not pool your money?
Correct. And again, I think we all get there. I think we do want to pool our money together, but I guess I'm just saying I want to preserve some of our autonomy, if you will.
Okay, Romero, is that a new hand? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a new hand, and I understand the perspective, but let me offer you a perspective and perhaps a risk. And the $1,406 offers the opportunity to bond for 20 years. And as we move along, that perhaps we're going to find a project that may require bonding the $1,406 for the next 20 years in order to pay for that bond. If we add a clause for a city to be able to take an annual responsibility, take the dollars out of $1,406, it creates an issue as to how we're going to be able to pay the bond. So it's more technical conversation that we need to have, and that creates a big issue. So if the county is the fiduciary responsible jurisdiction to issue municipal bonds to build a project, and if we have a clause, the jurisdiction in any given year is going to pull the $1,406 out, that is pulling the carpet under the county.
Right. Well, out from under the RHC. Okay. Keith?
Councilmember Cooper, I just wanted to remind the RHC of clause F and G of the interlocal agreement. Clause F is in regards to the RHC making funding decisions will serve as an advisory capacity. And then it includes the funds from SHB 1406. And then G below that, in the event that the BOC deviates from the funding recommendations provided by the RHC, the BOCC will provide revised recommendations to the RHC for consideration after the RHC reviews the BOCC's revised recommendations, the RHC will submit a final recommendation to the BOCC. So as we were developing the initial RHC ILA, there were definitely considerations about this tension and conflict, and paragraphs F and G were how we resolved that. Just recognizing that, you know, ultimately the county does have to make the funding decision as the funding agent, but they're taking the input of the RHC in giving it substantial weight and consideration, and then giving us another bite at the apple to review if they deviate from the recommendation. So, you know, I think there's pretty strong structure in there to help guide the county commission in decision-making. And certainly you all will be the first to know if there is a deviation from that. So, you know, just going back to the drafting of the RHC and that consideration.
So I hear two issues, and maybe I've had a headache today, so maybe I'm missing something, but one is about the county and the decision-making process, and one is about a city or a county pulling their funding out at any given point in a cycle, which right now, the only thing I see in the interlocal that covers that is the termination clause, which says you have to give 60 days notice. Rick?
Yeah, I guess part of that perspective too is trying to clarify the point. And as we're developing the initial ILA of the 1406 funds, we're looking at the 1406 funds to be the same as the HSF funds, where all the jurisdictions were pooling those funds to the RHC, with the RHC making that final decision, because we all had our set asides for those particular two sets of funds, versus, and then having that, so as it's written now or proposed now, those 1406 funds go into the county final decision versus the RHC final decision piece. And so it's a matter of whether the RHC would want to have the 1406 funds included in the sentence with the HSF funds, where the RHC is a final decision on that, or if the jurisdictions want to include it with the section above, where the county would have the final decision. I mean, that's where the differences lie as we were developing these ILAs going forward. And I think that gets to the point of the potential conflict of our individual ordinances setting aside those 1406 funds. It's not necessarily wanting to pull them away. It's how are the decisions made and how that decision process works going forward to prevent potential future conflicts.
Okay. Well, so my recommendation is to have the managers and the technical team figure out a recommendation you agree on and bring it back to us. You know, I talked to Tom about the timeline for this funding, and you know, we're not going to make it in time for the RFP, and we don't have money piled up because folks are spending 2020's money. So, you know, as long as we get this done in the next few months, it'll be in next year's RFP, and we'll have a whole year of money assembled to make it part of that. So I think we have time, and we have a lot to talk about tonight. So is it okay if we refer that back to the technical team rather than trying to finalize this conversation tonight?
Definitely.
Okay. So Tom, are you the lead, or Romero, are you the lead on that? I don't.
Thomas.
Yeah.
Okay, Thomas. Okay.
Okay. And I definitely want to involve, I think this is a county manager, city manager discussion, and not a technical team level discussion. I think this is at that manager level.
That makes sense to me. So is everybody else generally okay with the rest of the way the language is phrased? Okay, so figure that out and bring it back to us when you're ready. Okay, thank you. Okay, so that takes us to the RFP conversation. Tom.
All right, thanks everyone. We have, so on last Monday, so 10 days ago, the RFP funding committee met and had a robust 2-hour meeting to talk through the RFP, the priorities, the scoring criteria, the funding available. So we're going to kind of review what we did at that meeting and what decisions were made. There's a couple key decisions that I want to kind of bring up with this group and get input on. There's a lot to cover here, and I'm hoping we don't repeat the 2-hour meeting that the RFP funding work group had. So I'll try to go through some of this fairly quickly, but if there are questions or concerns that you've seen in the documents that were part of your package, please raise them. Our goal is to issue the RFP next Friday, the 26th. So we're really looking for kind of final decisions, final approval on these items tonight, so we can move forward and finalize the RFP and get it out for the 26th, with applications being due on April 2nd. So if I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay, just to kind of walk through so everyone can see the document, we're all on the same page. So I'm going to start off with the HSF funds, the Human Services Fund. This is the old HHSC dollars. And so you can see kind of the contributions for this year. This is based on 2019 tax revenue. So we have $272 to spend this year. The group has agreed on the same funding priority that we've used the last couple of years, is to support basic needs activities. So food and meal programs, childcare, personal hygiene, and other emergency needs. So this is consistent with how these funds have been spent the last couple of years. So if I can kind of walk through the document, and then kind of we'll open up for questions. And there's one or two places where I do want to kind of ask some questions and get some input. So that's the HSF, I think pretty straightforward and similar to past years. The Affordable Housing and Homeless Services RFP is our primary RFP. This includes our state dollars, which is Consolidated Homeless Grant and HEN dollars, along with our $2163. And so our funding priorities, this is based on what we talked about a little bit last month, based on what we heard also from the Housing Action Team and their recommendations around prioritizing projects that proactively and directly work to reduce the number of persons experiencing homelessness, and that work to reduce and eliminate racial disparities within the homeless crisis responses identified within our 5-year plan. So centering the priorities around our 5-year homeless crisis response plan. We've also talked about maintaining a proportional balance of funding between different populations of single adults, youth, families, seniors, and veterans. And we've called out kind of 4 broad categories of activities that we fund: our emergency shelter, operations for permanent supportive housing, outreach activities, and rapid rehousing. And those are not listed in any priority order. Those are all considered of equal priority. So those are for our uncommitted funds that we have available. Then we have a set of what we've traditionally called set-asides or committed funding priorities that we do want to fund, that we know that we need to put money aside for. And so these include our coordinated entry system. That's a requirement of the state CHG dollars that we have to operate a coordinated entry system. So we need to put aside money for that. Housing basic needs is something also that this body previously under the HHSC has used, wanted to fund housing basic needs, which kind of go to, I think of as homeless prevention activities. And we can talk about those a little bit more, but that is consistent with what's been funded the last couple of years. Also our cold and hazardous weather shelters. These are things we know we want to have a cold and hazardous weather capacity to expand that. So we set aside money specific to ensure that we fund those 2 activities. And then there's a new requirement this year that is coming from the state under the Consolidated Homeless Grant Program. Under draft guidelines that Commerce has issued, they're asking that we allocate 5% of our funds, which include the CHG dollars plus the 2163 document recording fee. That 5% of our funds go to what are called by and for organizations. So these organizations are operated by and for the community they serve. And so this final paragraph describes them. So they are serving a specific community, and they are culturally based, directed, and substantially controlled by individuals from the population they serve. And so And these are communities may include racial and ethnic minorities, immigrants and refugees, individuals who identify as LGBTQ+, individuals with disabilities or who are deaf, and Native Americans. So this is new for us this year. So we are looking to try to be in compliance with that draft guidelines. There may be some adjustments as Commerce finalizes that guideline, but we do expect something substantially similar to this. So we're looking to direct at least 5% of our funds to these types of organizations to do outreach activities. And so I'm going to skip down to our list of proposed set-aside. So what you can see here is we've listed the coordinated entry, housing basic needs, cold and hazardous weather, and the buy-in for organizations. These are things that we'd want to accept applications for and award funds to under this RFP process. We also have a couple other activities that we have set aside, we propose to have set aside funds that do not go out for applications that we know we need to do. One of them is the point in time count. So the county runs the point in time count every year, and we need funds to do that. So 25,000 has been a sufficient amount for the county to implement that point in time count. We've set aside, we're proposing $200,000 in emergency funds this year. This is something that has been set aside historically. Last year, we reduced that to $125,000, but we're recommending to go up to a full $200,000 for emergency fund. Those decisions would come back to the RHC for decisions on how to utilize those emergency funds. Our homeless coordinator is funded out of this pot of money. And we're also asking money new this year for racial equity technical assistance. And we talked about this a little bit last month as well, to bring a consultant to help us figure out how to move forward from a racial equity lens. Those are the initial set-asides that we've talked about, and those last ones are not included in the RFP. So at this point, I know Commissioner Mejia has a proposal to add an additional set-aside for this year. So I want to give her an opportunity to present her proposal and share that with you so we can have a discussion about whether to add an additional set-aside for these funds. So Commissioner Mejia, would you like to share your proposal with the group?
Quick, before you go to her, the list of buy-in for, could senior citizens be considered a buy-in for category or not?
At this point, they have not been identified as a separate buy-in for.
Okay.
No.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Carolina.
Yeah, so talking about seniors, that's actually what I am requesting a set aside for. Thank you, Jim, for that. And so I really want to, you know, I think the RHC should be supporting our senior citizens. We are seeing an increased number of seniors in our area that are either houseless or at risk. And so I'm looking to set aside a minimum of 100,000. It can be a floor. But I really want to see if there are programs out there that will support our senior citizens in our area and specifically target those low-income seniors and houseless seniors. Thoughts, questions?
So, and just, you know, I'll just throw out a comparison. Is there was a program at the South Sound Senior Services that was helping match roommates, you know, so different kinds of programs that help keep seniors from falling into homelessness. So how do people feel about that idea?
Like a home share program, yeah. Right. But I think we should, you know, leave it open for different programs to come in. I know that was one of them that I really liked, but let's see if there's any other org that will come in and propose programs that we can focus our attention on low income and houseless seniors.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim, for that.
And I would just add that probably senior citizens that are not an area that has received funding in the past, that have targeted funding. So our programs have been more for kind of single adults, but we have not funded traditionally out of the 2163 programs that have specifically targeted seniors in the past. So.
Can I ask a question? What do we, can someone define for me just the term set aside here? So if we do like an RFP or something and we have $100,000 earmarked for whatever. Let's say we do the senior thing and there's $100,000 for that in the 2021 proposed, but then we don't really receive any inquiries that we think will meet like the mission that we've set out for the use of these dollars. Do we still have to obligate those, or do we have flexibility in these numbers here? Like, are these part of the RFP where we will get people who apply to us who say, I am a buy and for organization, I would like some of this funding in order to accomplish our nonprofit vision or whatever we do? Am I conceptualizing that right for how this operationally will work?
That is correct. So these organizations would apply for this. They know that there's this pot of money that you intend to fund. Within the RFP, we do have language. It's at your discretion. If you don't receive, applications that you think are worthy of receiving funding, you're not required. So you have that. There's language in the RFP that says, the county is not obligated to award these funds if there's no kind of acceptable competitive application. So you certainly have the ability not to fund at this level, but it's expressing your intent that you're looking for applications that specifically address these types of activities that you would like to fund.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. I mean, if we're talking about 100,000 in 2021 for that, I think because we haven't done it before and we've sort of identified that this is an important population to take care of, I'd be fine with having another set aside of that for that particular population. It makes sense to me that we focus in an area we haven't focused on before if there's demonstrated need. And then it sounds like we would also have flexibility where if we got a proposal that we didn't think was worthy, we would still have the ability to not do that one, or, we could see what's out there. If we haven't ever had it on there before, maybe there's programs out there that we're not aware of, that we're not taking advantage of, that would help a lot of people.
Okay. Thanks, Michael. Carolyn? You're muted.
I'd like to speak in support of Carolina's proposal. I think seniors are such a growing proportion of our populace, and we'd be silly not to invest there. So I think it's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Okay. Joan?
I'd just like to comment on that after years and years on HHSC. I think that I or someone should call Virgil Clarkson and tell him we finally have something in there specifically for seniors. He advocated for this every single year. So okay. I commend you, Carolina, for putting this in there. I think it's something we've missed at times over the years. So I'm very supportive of it.
Yeah, when you're talking, I was thinking, well, we should name it the Barbara Clarkson Set Aside, or the JW.
Yes, Jim.
How do you feel about that proposal?
I feel great about it. I think it's absolutely appropriate. I just we do have to find now an organization and stimulate them to put in a proposal that can be spent that way.
Right. Hopefully more than one, so we can compare some stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Carolyn, you have your hand again, or is that the same hand?
No, this is a new question. Okay. So how will we winnow out this $100,000? Will this be staff? Do we need another meeting of the RFP committee to say, okay, we're going to take 10,000 from this and 20,000 from that in order to get this 100,000 pot?
Tom?
No, I don't believe we need an additional meeting. And so one of the things we're going to talk about next is the funding we do have available. So as you can see, the proposed set-asides right now, the amount that's being proposed is $1.38 million is what that adds up to. We have at least $3 million to spend. And so if that amount goes up to 1.48 million, you'll receive those applications. That means there's still, approximately 1.5 million that is, open for competition for any eligible applicant. So all it does is, it reduces the amount that's generally available under that uncommitted kind of set of priorities from approximately 1.6, 1.7 million to 1.6, 1.5 million or whatever, however the math works out. So, but I don't think there's any additional conversation needed after if it's the will of the group to move forward with that proposal.
Okay. Well, and I think I'll add in my support, and you have unanimous support. So, do we need to vote, Tom, or can we vote on the conversation at the end?
Yeah, I think if we can do we'll make note of that, we can do one. If we can do one broad vote at the end, I think that would be easiest if that's acceptable.
Okay. Any other comments on that proposal? Thank you, Carolina.
Thank you. Thank you all.
So before I move on, I do know I moved through all those set-asides and kind of the priorities fairly quickly. I just did want to circle back. Were there any other kind of comments? Was there anything anyone else saw in the either the set-asides or the language around the priorities that was of concern for folks?
I don't see anyone. My only question, and I don't need an answer now, is if the RHC will be involved in finding the contractor for the technical assistance around race and equity.
Yes, I think and I kind of looked at Keely. She's been taking the lead on this effort. So we've been having initial conversations, but certainly we would come to the RHC with a proposal on how to move forward on spending those funds. So yes, the RHC would certainly have a role in how that moves forward.
Okay. Cool. I think you can keep moving.
All right. So I'm going to move us to kind of a question around funding, and especially the 2163 funds. So one of the things that some folks will remember, those of you who were on the HHSC last summer, is around May or June of this time last year, we were really concerned that we were going to see a drop in 2163 revenue. We didn't know what the economy was doing. Kind of a couple months into COVID, things were slowing down. The country was kind of going into lockdown, and we were really concerned that we were going to see a substantial reduction in 2163 revenue. So the awards we made last year were fairly, and projections we made last year were quite conservative, not knowing what that revenue would look like. Turns out that with interest rates so low, many people have refinanced their homes, which has created a real windfall of 2163 revenue. So right now we are projecting, we had, last year we thought we had a fund balance of around $600,000 that we were trying to spend down. And we issued contracts for around $2.3 million, trying to, thinking we were gonna get revenue of around $2 million, spend 2.3 and spend down some of that fund balance. Right now, we are on track to collect $3.3 million this year in 2163 revenue. So an additional $1 million, $1.3 million over what we projected. So we have a fund balance that is projected that we need to spend down. So as I said, in the past couple of years, we've issued contracts of 2163 in the $2.3 to $2.4 million range. We are projecting, next year to collect around $3 million if the trends hold, plus the additional, $1.5 million that we've kind of will accumulate from this year plus the previous fund balance. And so one of the things I wanted to share with you is, really kind of two options for the RHC to consider, and we don't need a final decision tonight. But one is, whether all of this money should be allocated through this RFP process, which would mean, we are issuing their one-year contracts, but they're really two-year commitments for most of these funds. And so it would be around $3.7 million and potentially to spend through awards this year. The other option is to spend an amount less than that, perhaps $3 million or what comes in, and then use some of that fund balance for an RHC identified project. that this group wants to, use some of this money for a project, whether that's safe parking, a second mitigation site, whatever, could be pulled from this amount of money to use for that project. So wanted to put that out there, get some initial reactions and thoughts. It could be an option. One of the things we've talked about is waiting to see what your applications come in and what applications you want to fund, and then making a determination of how much of that resource you want to put out in contracts through the RFP process, and then making a determination of how much you want to use for an RHC identified project. But I did want to let you know about this, approximately 1.5 million in funding that we, are anticipating based on the high level of 2163 revenue we're collecting so far this year. So I guess I'd ask for kind of initial thoughts, reactions to kind of how you'd like to proceed with the 2163 funds, especially for this year.
So I guess so just for some context, because we've talked about the shift to kind of the scattered site model and putting more support in the camps. Is that conversation funded somewhere else, or does that need to be part of this context before I open it up, Tom?
So as part of the scattered site, the county has identified $530,000 of existing funding to use to support that scattered site. We are continuing conversations with City of Olympia around kind of that model, and those are ongoing, and hopefully we can touch on that, before the end of this meeting, and Keith can give an update on that. So I think there's probably the first 6 months of funding for that pilot project has been identified, but beyond that 6 months, I think that the funding is uncertain.
Okay, Michael, you're muted.
Sorry, I was actually going to ask the same thing on whether those buckets were mixed or not. I think knowing that we sort of have 500,000 that can buy us maybe 6 months, I'm leaning towards option 2 with the flexibility of option 1. Like if I guess what I don't understand is you mentioned, Tom, the possibility of waiting to see what we get in the RFP. So how would that look any different from just doing option 1? Would we be stating in the RFP, like, we have 3 million to award as opposed to stating we have 3.7? Or it sort of seems like no matter what we do, we're going to be submitting an RFP, getting a bunch of requests back for funding, and then it'll be up to us to choose what we want to do. So I guess my question is, if we want to do option 2, does it make the RFP look any different? Seems like sort of the safe way is to just do it and see what we get, but I'm kind of curious if that would change anything with the process.
Yeah, you're right. At the end of the day, it's really your decision to kind of how much you want to award. I think it really is that kind of outreach to providers to say, we have 3 million available, and they know, okay, we can propose some projects to expand our existing operations, and there's a little bit more money out there, and but if they hear there's 3.7 million, maybe you might get some applications that are a little more robust, or kind of bigger sites, bigger ideas in mind. So I think it's just how you present it. Of you anticipate spending around 3 million, or if you've got 3.7, you might get some. If you're looking for some big ideas, putting out there that you have 3.7 million might generate some of those big ideas if that's what you're looking for.
Okay. Well, I'm just sort of looking at the writing on the wall with how are we going to pay for scattered site? And I'm sort of leaning towards option 2, because I know that we pay for the first 6 months, we need to have some kind of sustainability strategy beyond once we get to month 7. So I would lean towards option 2, I think, because we're definitely going to get more than $3 million worth of requests from people anyway. I would assume, but it's my 2 cents.
Others? Carolyn, Carolina, JW?
That means everyone's good with what I said, Jim.
I'm good with it.
Yeah, I think I'm leaning toward option 2.
Okay.
Yeah, me as well.
We could put in language in the RFP saying, you know, we have approximately 3 million, and you, at the end of the day, you do have the flexibility to, you know, if there's a project that comes in and if you want to go up to award 3.2 million, you certainly have that option. So we can kind of say there's approximately 3 million available for award, and then you can, based on what comes in, you can kind of make adjustments to that number.
And just to be clear, the 1.38 million is part of the 3 million, or some of it is, because some of the 1.38 is over 2 years.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So that does include those set-asides. It does include that 1.38 million, even though some of that would not be included in the RFP. So
okay.
And that's a 1-year amount. And so even though some of those we've put as 2-year awards, the intent would be in the second year, we give ourselves the out that if there's a dramatic change in revenue, that we don't, you know, we say our intent is to fund you at the second year at the same level without having to resubmit a new application, but we reserve the right to adjust your award if our revenue projections are off and we need to make those adjustments. So it's really, they don't need to submit a new application, so it saves that application review process, but we do give ourselves that ability to be flexible for that second year funding. It's our intent to fund at the same level, but if revenue is not available, then we reserve the right to adjust that award.
All right, cool. Thank you for clarifying for me.
Carolyn?
I just wanted to add on another thought about option 2. I just think it's really important that we are kind of on twin tracks here, that we're trying to address more immediate needs, like with the scattered sites and that sort of thing, but that we're also building a savings toward a big project, a big regional project that we're working on. And so I just want to make sure that we keep an eye on both balls there.
Okay. Good comment. JW, I saw you nodding. Are you good with that option 2?
You keep getting me, but you read my body language very well.
Good.
Yes,
okay. Okay, so we are good on option 2.
Great, thank you for that. I'm going to keep us moving because I know still a couple things to cover. So those were our homeless services dollars. And so now for our capital, our affordable housing capital projects, we're anticipating, you know, around, you know, 1.4 million or so in funds that are available for these capital projects. You'll recall in past years, we've had a pipeline where we've identified 2 projects a couple years out. And then we ask for those formal applications to come in to make sure they're still viable, solid projects that we award. This year, there was 1 project in the pipeline. This was Quixote Communities, Ponza, that was originally in the pipeline for this year that has said they are not ready to move forward with their project this year. So we do have 1 open slot in the pipeline this year. So Foundation for the Challenged is the other recipient of this year for pipeline, but we do have 1 open slot. And so the priorities reflect the discussions that came through the Housing Action Team, the Affordable Housing Group, focusing on capital projects for new unit creation, preservation of units, including permanent supportive housing, permanent housing, multifamily rental, home ownership for literally homeless families and individuals. These are projects targeted to 60% or below of area median income as the income threshold. They've recommending adding a priority around home ownership and creating wealth through home ownership, and then ensuring capital projects are proportionally dispersed with racial equity to across subpopulations. So we're looking for you know, 1 new project that's perhaps not anticipated this year. And so that's the capital project. And then we also at the same time put out a request for information. So we are looking for priorities for what are the projects we want to fund for 2024. And so we're putting out the very similar priorities to identify those capital projects. This allows our funds to be some of the first money into a project, allows these agencies to go to the state, to the Housing Trust Fund, to the Finance Commission for additional money, to other kind of private sector funding sources. So knowing that there's a little bit of certainty that their project will be funded in 2024. So we'll be soliciting applications for at least 2 projects, possibly a 3rd project this year. So these priorities, once again, reflect kind of the recommendations that come out of the affordable housing team under the housing action team. So any kind of questions or concerns around the capital housing dollars? This is pretty similar to past years in terms of how the process has worked. The priorities have adjusted a little bit with a little more emphasis on home ownership and creation of wealth for low-income families, and possibly adding a 3rd project for 2024 instead of just funding 2.
Okay. Comments or questions? Not seeing any takers on that. Good.
All right, thank you. All right, so I'm gonna keep moving us along here. So next is our scoring criteria. So these are how applications will be scored and rated. Once again, we will have a technical review team made up of city and county staff who will review applications and score them. That committee will then present their recommendations and funding scores to the RFP funding work group. The funding work group will then kind of review that, do the hard work, and then come to this body with a full list of recommendations of applications to fund. So these criteria are very similar to the criteria that we've used in the past several years. The one change, the biggest change for this year is with that emphasis around racial equity is there's been a recommendation by the RFP funding work group to increase the scoring for supporting vulnerable and historically disadvantaged populations from up to 20 points. So that will be the 2nd highest scored criteria for applications. And so we had good discussion about whether that should be 10, 15, 20 points, but ultimately the work group decided that to reflect the importance of this, that 20 points was appropriate.
But I had a brief comment to that.
Go ahead.
Yes.
I think Keely pointed this out in a meeting recently, and this is meant to encourage rather than punish an organization. So particularly in this first year, organizations may not quite have a whole programmatic thing, but if they can demonstrate they are doing a number of things to serve these underserved and disadvantaged populations, that's how they'll get the points. But again, it's more to reward good behavior than punish lack of programs.
Cool. Okay. Thank you.
All right. And then this is for the RFI for those 2024 capital projects. We have some different scoring criteria. We're looking around, once again, meeting the need for the type of population served. And then there's points around units created. So we're looking for, you get more points if you create more units of housing. Leverage is important in this. We're really looking for those folks who can leverage other sources of funds to make our local resources go as far as possible. And then we're looking at the strength of their development team and project feasibility as well. So those are the scoring criteria looking for those projects for the 2024 pipeline. We don't get quite as much information on these projects, so the scoring criteria is a little bit different. And then finally, the application review teams. As I said, these are going to be reviewed. Most of them will be reviewed by staff, but So for our Human Services Fund, and then the Housing Basic Needs projects, the elected members of the RFP funding work group will be actually reviewing and scoring those applications. This carries on with how those have been funded. Elected officials have reviewed and scored those applications for the past several years. So the group decided they wanted to continue to do that. So those are your members who will be reviewing and scoring those applications. And then for the homeless services and capital projects, we have a list of staff, so at least one member from Lacey, the county, Olympia, Tumwater will participate. We've also learned Katrina Van Every from TRPC will also join our group to bring a regional perspective, especially kind of help bring in and for unincorporated in South County, bring that perspective. And we're working to identify a second person from Olympia that will either be Teal, Russell, or Olivia, who will join that team. So, so that is what I have for you this evening. I know that was a lot of information, a lot of priorities, and so looking for kind of any last kind of questions, comments, anything in there that gives you heartburn, and if not, if we can go ahead and kind of proceed with a general approval of this approach with the amendment to add the senior housing set aside for a minimum of 100,000.
Okay. So I guess anyone, and I don't see anyone raising their hand, so I'm gonna ask two questions. Why the elected official, like tell me what the reason is for having the elected officials score those two funding pots.
I think it started, and then, Councilmember Kathy may weigh in with her opinion, because I think she was one of the folks who's really interested in doing that. The HHSC several years ago wanted to take on that responsibility. So it's kind of a carryover from the way the CIP and HHSC was reviewing those applications, and they wanted to, I think it's fair to say that they, were really wanted to make sure those applications, they wanted a little more hands-on approach to those applications. I don't know, any members are welcome to weigh in on that.
Carolyn, you started to talk, and then I'll go to Joan.
Yeah, I just briefly, this is the money that comes directly out of our 0.5% sales tax set aside. So it's totally local money. And we just felt as the elected representatives of these jurisdictions that it should be the electeds who control how it's spent.
Joan?
Thank you. I think we tried at least 1 year, maybe two, to have it done more by outside or organizations or so forth. But we ran into the thing where people who were applying for money for their organization were scoring and making decisions about how to spend the money. So it came back to us feeling that having the electeds do it would be more fair. But we've gotten, however we decide to do it, there will be some negative feeling about it, but we just have to do the best we can.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't in those committees or groups last year or the previous years, but to me, it just makes more sense to have it all be done by a technical team and then have that committee do the review. But I'm not going to push back on that right now. We can have it as a conversation when we're not crunched for time. It just to me is, I thought that's the path we were going, is having technical experts from, like the other two lists, do that scoring versus elected officials.
We made the decision that the human services money would continue to be done by the jurisdictions that contribute the money, and then the technical team does their thing, and then we share what we've done. And if somebody has some comments or additions or corrections, then we do it among the teams.
Yeah. I think as long as you're doing the final look with everything in one place, I'm fine with that for now. My long game here is to have the decision making be as objective as possible, and elected officials aren't objective about grant making to organizations they're involved with. In my experience, it's not possible. So, but I get it, and I trust all of you. So don't take that the wrong way.
We're only taking it as you being judgmental against the system.
Right on. My second question is, in your timelines, Tom, you're very close to being able to do everything in a 2-year cycle. So is it possible to do the Human Services Fund and the cold weather, cold and hazardous weather funds as 2-year grants as well? So we don't have to do an RFP next year.
That's an excellent question, and something other than
1406, I should say.
Other than 1406, I think for that's possible. We could look at cold and hazardous weather. The reason I didn't do the 2 years for cold and hazardous weather is I know 2828 Martin Way is currently under construction, and my long-term hope is that once 2820 Martin Way is fully constructed, they will be able to support kind of cold and hazardous weather activities. But I don't know if that project will be fully complete for next winter. And so my thought was we may need a 1 year in case that project is not going to be ready to support cold and hazardous weather for next winter. But we would want to bring it on for the following winter. So that was my only hesitation, but I would be, if there's comfort and you want to move to 2 years, I would not have any concerns with that. And as you said, we could go with no RFP next year. And we certainly were trying to move in that direction.
Okay. Well, that logic makes sense. What about the Human Services Fund?
The Human Services Fund, we have been kind of year to year, but once again, of the will of this group, if you'd like to do 2-year awards, it's really the will of this group and how you'd like to proceed.
We did 2-year awards 1 year, a section of our.
Yeah, we did 3-year, they did 3-year awards.
We had 2, 3, and
a 3-year award.
I would say it was somewhat successful. I mean, we have to review anyway, if it's a 2-year or a 3-year, are they living up to what they said and they want money for another year? Where are they in their work or what they said they were going to do? Right. So there'd still be some kind of review, Jim. It might not be a whole RFP.
Okay. Well, I think let's, rather than trying to churn the train right now, let's go with what's recommended and then have those be conversations as we move ahead. That makes sense to me. So those are my questions. Anyone else have any other questions or concerns or additions? Okay, so then need a motion to approve as presented with the modification of adding the set aside for senior citizens and option 2 around the, I don't know, I want to say bubble fund, but that's a bad word from 5 or 10 years ago. So extra cash that we have accumulated. So is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. There you go, JW. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, Tom, can you give us just a quick timeline so we know when this process will be done?
Yeah, so as I said, February 26th, the RFP will be on the street. We will be pushing out a press release and information on our website. There will be a bidders conference on, I want to say March 3rd. March 3rd. Where we'll answer questions from applicants and give them more information about the RFP. Applications will be due April 2nd. Shortly thereafter, the review teams will receive those applications, spend a good chunk of April reviewing and scoring those applications. And then in May is when the RFP funding group will do their work to finalize recommendations. And at your May meeting, we will bring forth the recommendations of applications to fund. I'm looking for your final approval on those application awards. And then we go to the Board of County Commissioners in June to get the authority to sign those contracts. Some contracts will begin July 1st, and then some contracts begin September 1st, depending on the fund source. And the federal contracts start sometime after September 30th when they've completed an environmental review and they're ready to go.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so we used some time, but we still have I got 18 minutes left and 2 more topics. So Keith, safe parking.
I can be brief and anticipate coming back with a fleshed out proposal for a safe parking program. As Tom indicated, the county and the city of Olympia and other members of the tech team have been discussing creating a safe parking program, a scattered site support program in place of a safe parking program, I should say. We've developed a draft of that, and we're still discussing the details associated with that. So we should be able to come back at the next meeting and make a formal proposal to you about that program. But basically, it's really focusing in on site management by enhancing garbage collection and management at our major homeless encampments and street camping areas, enhancing the sanitation associated with those areas, including potentially bringing LOT into the equation to help manage the septic and effluent from the RVs that are parked in our communities. And then also enhancing the case management and providing much more focused case management to the individuals in these scattered sites throughout our community, and doing it as a pilot program with really intensive case management and really intensive site management, and to see what sort of impact we can have over a 6-month period. Running an experiment essentially to see how it goes. Obviously there's some concerns there in our ability to pull that off with the resources that we have and the capacity of our nonprofits that would support that. But again, those conversations are ongoing, and we'll be prepared to be in more depth at the next meeting.
Great. Questions for Keith? Okay, thank you, Keith. So communication planning says me, but I think it's Keely.
All right. Yes, so we had a really interesting experience where actually a former city council member from 1993 at the city of Olympia reached out as a citizen to myself, and then I extended that reach out to Teal Russell of City of Olympia to talk about a post that was on Nextdoor. The post on Nextdoor was basically like, nobody's doing anything about homelessness. And so he reached out, did some digging around to see who to talk to, and found me. And so from that, what we gained was on that Nextdoor conversation, there were over 340 to 360 posts of citizens who were really upset that nobody was doing anything about homelessness. And after talking with us, he's like, well, nobody knows what you're doing. Nobody, like, this is great. I would love to share this information. So he then put it on a bulleted list that Teal had sent to him out on the internet to that group, and everybody apparently was pretty happy to have that information. And so it just spurred a conversation around, boy, there's so much going on and so much that we do. And this is literally the only thing I talk about all day long, but I'm only talking to mostly these faces and a couple others. It's easy to take for granted that we're not talking to everyone, and not everyone, is Facebook friends with the county or whatever. So we discussed at the technical team about bringing together, yes, the communication team, but a more frequently meeting team. So in replacing the common understanding group, having a more frequent communications group. And so I sent that information out to the PIOs and Councilmember Cox about communication in general, and about any press release around that would go out eventually around the ILA being signed. And so I'm kind of waiting to hear back. I did hear from Councilmember Cox, and I heard from Megan Porter, the county's PIO supervisor. Megan Porter has indicated she would like to remain that person in those conversations. So we're hoping that we can figure out a way to support the efforts that we are all doing as the RHC, but then also individual jurisdictions are doing a lot of work. And it's important for us to know what everybody's doing. At the technical team, I hear a lot about what Lacey and Tumwater are doing. And I'm in constant conversation with the city of Olympia. So how do we get that out there into as many different areas as possible? So that was a conversation that started 2 weeks ago. I'm really excited to see how that might shape itself, and get really creative about getting that information out to folks that are just not getting it. And
cool.
That's about it. Mm-hmm.
So I guess, is there an opportunity to put more in the RHC ILA press release, given that that's coming soon?
I'm looking at Councilmember Cox. So Megan Porter sent out the draft of the ILA, and I know that Councilmember Cox looked at it. And have you offered some edits?
No, I'm sorry. I've been in the hospital for a few days and I haven't.
Yeah, no pressure, no problem. And then we're waiting to hear from Tumwater and Lacey's PIO. So just a few minor adjustments from the original draft is what I understand.
Okay.
But just want to make sure everybody's eyes are on it.
Okay. Michael? Go ahead, Carolyn.
Yeah, I was going to say, I did a fairly substantial rewrite of the very original news release, mainly to update it because so much had happened since Megan crafted the original.
Okay.
And then I think that's making the rounds again.
Okay. Michael?
Thanks. I was just gonna say, I really like the idea of having sort of a standing body that can work on facilitating communications. Like when we look back to Carpenter and the first sort of project we were looking at, I think one of the problems we ran into was we didn't really have the opportunity or the resources to soften the ground with some of the local folks around there, like some of the businesses and stuff. And we didn't have kind of a comprehensive communications plan, which sort of led to some problems. So I like that we're standing up some infrastructure so that we can try to support needs like that and reaching out into the community. One thing I want us to be a teeny bit cautious about is to make sure that we're focusing on, I would love when we can do the press release after we do something really big, right? Like when we accomplish a really big project, we're able to do that press release. I just don't want us to get too far ahead of ourselves in discussing our, I don't know, the process that we've been going through so far.
The
right?
legal document? I mean, come on, Mike.
Yeah, like it's really great. I love it. Very well written. But we're gonna set expectations, so I'm excited for us to have the opportunity to meet those. Is all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. And I will say that the intent on some of the more frequent is things that have already happened or are happening, and so this camp clearance happened. The city is, supporting these camps in these ways. The Lacey's got a open house, et cetera, that kind of thing. So not necessarily projecting ideas, but just reporting out.
Okay. Sounds great. And I think maybe there's, once we figure out what that plan is going to be, we should think about whether we need resources to support it. So that's cool. Okay. Anything else on communications? So we have good of the order, and we're lucky enough to have the busiest person in Thurston County on our call. Shelly, do you want to give us any updates or say hi, and then I'll go to Keith.
Yes, I do want to say hi. Thanks, Jim. Hi, everyone. Really, I have probably a lot of updates I could share with you in terms of vaccine and our plans to serve the houseless population and those in our permanent supportive housing projects. But right now, our main issue is we just don't have supply. As I'm sure you've all heard, we only got 300 doses for all of Thurston County this last week. But we are hoping that we'll see that continue to increase as the weeks go on. Tomorrow, Dr. Abdimalik and I will be speaking with the Hazardous Weather Task Force to further discuss ongoing plans for this population. So I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has, or if there's anything I can do for any of you or your jurisdictions or groups that you represent, just let me know, and I'm happy to come speak to you or your groups, do whatever I can to help.
Thank you, Shelly.
Thank you.
Joan, did you have a question for Shelly?
Yeah,
or go ahead.
I did for Shelly. I just wondered, wow, 300 is not very much. Is it 300 for the whole county and then other organizations or hospitals or pharmacies or whatever get their own shipments? Or is that all that comes to Thurston County through anybody who's giving?
That is for anybody, for every single provider in Thurston County. So that's for first doses, I should clarify. We did get second doses allocated to us, but as you may have also heard in breaking news, due to the weather, there was a shipment delay from CDC. So that's resulting in us having to cancel many of the second dose clinics planned for this weekend. So
how do you notify people of that?
Out in the media. And for those that have appointments, they get individual either emails or phone calls, however they were registered, to let them know that their appointment has to be rescheduled. Really, really tough situation.
Hope I don't get one of those.
Shelly, I have a related question since we're here. How has it gone in as far as people being scheduled for their second vaccination? Have many people been left out in the lurch and not been notified, or is that working rather well for the people who are administering the first dose to notify them when they need their second dose and get them in a timely fashion?
For the most part, it's working well. This weekend is probably our first snafu, and part of that is because because Thurston County facilities first started getting vaccine towards middle to end December. So the second doses have just been rather recent for us. So the typical process is that when people come and get their first dose, they get their appointment for their second dose for usually 3 to 4 weeks later, depending on what vaccine type they have. And then they get contacted through that system. This is the first time that second doses have had to be canceled or rescheduled. There is a little bit of leeway with that 28 days, at least for the Moderna vaccine. You can have up to 42 days to get that second dose. But we're starting to hear a lot of stories of people that got their first dose somewhere else. And then if they can't get back to that original location they got their first dose, for example, if they went out of town or they were out of town, then they're seeking second doses from elsewhere. And how it works, when you get the first dose, you automatically order the second dose with that same provider. So we're going to be working on having second dose catch-up clinics for people here in the near future as soon as we have an increase in vaccine supply.
Great, thank you for that.
Good question. Okay, I'm going to move to Keith.
Thanks, Chair Cooper. Just very briefly, the tech team met with Community Solutions in Providence on Thursday and Wednesday and heard a presentation from Community Solutions. Our suggestion and recommendation is that we bring them forward to you, to the RHC for next steps. We think that they could be a valuable addition, helping us particularly around the areas of data collection and improving the quality of our data. And at least from my perspective, better data leads to better solutions and decisions. So I'm all in favor of that.
Okay, great. So Tom and Carolina and I will work on getting that into the agenda.
Great, thank you.
Keely?
Really briefly, update on the hazardous weather event that was declared by the by Shelley Slaughter and Dr. Abdumalik and the Hazardous Weather Task Force from Wednesday through Sunday of last week. We didn't have a lot we could do because of COVID and the limits on our shelters, but we did have First Christian offer up to 20 beds. So they had about a total of 77 extra bed nights. St. Michael's was able to house 24, 23, 22 gentlemen for 24/7. That was, some folks must have left and come back 24/7 through Monday night, I believe. So those were some extra beds that were added. And then City of Olympia's Parks and Rec down at the Olympia Center, and with city staff, we were able to stand up a warming center. First day with 9 people, and then after that, for the next 4 days or so, we saw an average of 35 individuals come in to receive coffee, other outreach supplies like socks and whatnot, and just get warm during that period of time. And so it was a smaller response. Oh, and also Partners in Prevention Education provided outreach supplies to the encampments during the initial stages of the snowstorm. And so all of the elements of our system and those in which we have contracted with met their contract and were amazing, and just pulled out all the stops, particularly Gabe Ash from Catholic Community Services and Meg Martin from Interfaith Works. I was able to staff a couple of days, so that was excellent. So I just wanted to give a quick hazardous weather update. And then secondly, on Monday at noon, the Homeless Housing Hub is hosting the annual Homeless Hero Award. It's usually a luncheon, but this year, of course, it's just a Zoom call. And so we will be honoring, usually it's one individual that's chosen by their peers. This year, we're honoring every shelter and 2 outreach organizations that were able to provide shelter and outreach services throughout the last year during COVID. So every one of those shelters will be honored with a plaque and outreach efforts. So it is a public meeting. You're welcome to attend. I know Commissioner Menzer is scheduled to make comments. The Anna Schlecht Legacy Award is also going to be presenting St. Michael's Parish and Sacred Heart Church with the Legacy Award this year, which comes with a $1,000 prize. So those shelters will be also specially honored this year. So it's a really cool event. You're all welcome. If you're curious, or if you don't have the Zoom, you can get in contact with me, and I'll make sure that you have access to the event so you can attend.
Great, thank you, Keely. Do we need to register for that to get the link?
No, it's actually Community Youth Services hosts that meeting, because Derek Harris is the chair of the HHH. So he sends out the Zoom. So I can just send it. It's just a regular Zoom.
Okay. Yeah, can you just send it to all of us?
Sure.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Carolyn?
Just a reminder that City of Lacey's citizen or community-based group working on homelessness has an open house that went up this week. It will be up through March 1st. You can find the link to it on the City of Lacey website, and it's open to everybody. It's not just Lacey citizens. I mean, obviously we want to hear what Lacey residents have to say, but I think if you all could help spread the word, it's a great way to gather some data from beyond Lacey city limits that would be of use to this organization. So thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so we're at time, but I wanted to see if, is there an update on the meeting scheduling conversation?
I can provide a brief update. Nicole Boys sent out a request to I believe the city managers and county manager to kind of get input on your jurisdictional availability. The one other option that looks like a possibility was the fourth Wednesday of the month from, sorry, and I had fourth Wednesday of the month from 4 to 5:30. But I don't think she's received a response from Olympia yet to know if that time would work for Olympia. So that's, you know, a possibility, but need to have a little more. We can send that out and see if that's really going to work for folks. But that was the one time in the limited number of options that were available that received the most responses. Was the fourth Wednesday from 4 to 5:30.
Okay. So Keith or Carrie, will you make sure we respond? Okay. And then as soon as you know, send out a note, Tom, and see if we can get agreement that that'll work.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we are done and ready to adjourn. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice rest of your week and weekend, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks. Good meeting.